It began, as these things often do, with a vote. Threxal Zanquor had been present in the Grand Sphericum when the declaration passed, unanimous, sterile, and unburdened by compassion. The great tribunal's crystalline chorus of consent echoed across the inner minds of the gathered species. Article 72. Termination of non-compliant sentient species. Designate Terra, humanity. No protests, no mourning. Only the gentle thrum of consensus as the holographic signature of extermination crystallized in the chamber's core. He remembered watching the human envoy, barely clothed in tattered UNN fabric, fall to his knees in silence. His name had been Ambassador Quentin Sorel, a rare specimen of calm defiance in the face of the Dominion's bureaucratic malice. The humans had begged for leniency, not for peace, no. They knew better, but for time, for understanding, for survival. They were denied. Humanity had grown too unpredictable, too war-minded, too disobedient to the Grand Compact. They refused biometric transparency laws, defied genetic audits, and worst of all, dared colonize beyond permitted boundaries, claiming the void between lawful stars as their own. Non-compliant, the Vexari had declared. Non-convergent, echoed the Selthi, their photosynthetic judges flickering cold hues. Contaminating, spat the Krothi, shivering in revulsion at the human proclivity for rage and art in equal measure. So, a fleet was built, and the Sol system died screaming. The cleansing of Proxima Centauri b had been swift. 70,000 human settlers, vaporized in a radiant inferno unleashed by a Vaxari particle lance, a weapon meant to sterilize planetary crusts for mining. The survivors who tried to flee in short-range vessels were hunted down and atomized by the Krothi shard frigates, whose crews boasted of killing meat that dared dream. Threxal cataloged each death. He'd been assigned to observe and record, to learn from the purge of this barbaric species. Yet, something in the screams of children as their evacuation freighters ruptured, a particular frequency, rattled deep in the subharmonics of his secondary mind. He had never heard such despair. It lingered. Then came Earth, Sol Prime, blue, imperfect, and defiant, a world whose atmosphere sang in ancient storms, and whose people, even knowing the fate of their colonies, refused to surrender. They called the human resistance the Black Mantle, a coalition of old-world militaries, rogue AIs, and traitorous species who had long ago abandoned the Dominion's codes. They took up arms not to win, but to make the heavens weep for every murdered child on Proxima. And bleed they did. The Battle of Saturn's graveyard was supposed to be routine. It became a charnel house. Threxal's account was detailed, meticulous. At 0103 Galactic Standard Time, Vexari Command Carrier Resplendence breached orbit. Human resistance was expected to consist of obsolete coil cannons and EMP mines. What we encountered instead was a tactical illusion and hellfire. He watched in awe as a human vessel, identified later as TNS Wormspire, decloaked inside the Vaxari formation and unleashed a railcore cascade, splitting 3 Dominion dreadnoughts before self-destructing in martyrdom. The shockwave shredded the hulls of nearby cruisers, killing 8,200 non-human personnel in seconds. A suicide tactic, barbaric, unthinkable, and effective. Despite their resolve, Earth fell. It took 3 Terran months. The orbital bombardment began with precision. Skyscrapers in Delhi, launch silos in Colorado, hydro farms in Brazil. Yet even as cities burned, the humans fought like beasts driven to preserve the idea of memory itself. Resistance became religion, and death, scripture. One field report described a human battalion on the scorched ruins of Moscow, led by a woman named Bryony Calwin, who fought for 9 days without food or shelter, turning corpses into barricades, singing hymns of vengeance as orbital fire rained around her. She died with a smile. Threxall reviewed her logs personally. She had not fought for humanity's victory. She had fought to make their genocide cost more than the Dominion could afford. The final act of Earth came not from space, but the seas. The Leviathan protocols, long thought abandoned, were triggered. Tidal waves rose unnaturally across the Pacific. Eye-controlled nuclear submarines, buried for centuries beneath the Mariana Trench, awoke. They released payloads, not at enemies, but into Earth's mantle itself. The planet cracked. The oceans boiled. Threxall recorded the seismic symphony with a horrid fascination. Earth's crust ruptured. Magma bled into the stratosphere. Every Terran biosignature vanished. The humans had not merely died. They had denied the Dominion their prize. In the silence that followed, the Alien Federation rejoiced. Their records showed no remaining resistance. All Terran colonies had been sterilized, their archives scrubbed, their languages restricted in interstellar net protocols, their names purged from shared galactic memory repositories. Humanity had been undone, or so they believed. But Threxall could not sleep. The subharmonics still echoed, the screams. He accessed restricted logs when no one watched. He read intercepted journals, shattered recordings of Terran soldiers whispering lullabies in burning bunkers, of mothers shielding children in orbital shelters that never opened. He began to dream. Not as his kind did, in controlled neural echoes, but as the humans had described it. His mind's twisted with fire and betrayal. He began to see their faces. He began to feel. A curse, perhaps, or a warning. 17 years later, the first whisper came. A Krathi patrol in the tranquil Vane sector vanished. No wreckage, no distress calls, just silence. The surveillance buoy recorded 1 second of footage before going black. A shadow, sleek, angular, moving faster than light law permitted. The humans were gone. But something remained. We thought silence was the final punctuation of humanity's tale. But silence, I have learned, is not absence. It is the sharp intake of breath before a scream. And in the shadowed edges of mapped space, where our charts warned of lingering radiation from Terran annihilation protocols, the scream began to rise. It started with the Barthuan incident. The patrol frigate Chishelval of the Krathi Guardian Fleet was tasked with monitoring what remained of Sector 3 Igama, a former Terran mining corridor. Debris still floated there. Human cargo pods, rusted platforms, skeletal freighters draped in the void's frostbite. The Chishelval's final transmission was erratic, scrambled. It lasted 11 seconds. I've listened to it over 4,000 times. Unidentified vessel, design unknown, warp signature human, impossible, emerging from, no, it's inside. Hull breach, no warning, no mercy, no. Then silence, again. When the recovery team arrived 6 hours later, they found only fragments. The Chishelval had been gutted from within, not destroyed, not exploded. The hull had been surgically severed, as if by a blade hundreds of meters wide. No bodies were recovered. The logs recorded no warp signature exit. It had come and gone like a ghost. The Dominion dismissed it as a pirate attack, a glitch, a relic drone, perhaps one of the autonomous human war AIs, long thought dead in Jupiter's black rings. But then it happened again, and again, and again. 7 vessels lost in 23 days. The strikes followed no pattern. They did not raid for supplies. They did not leave survivors. And every time, a black void opened in the logs. No visuals, no heat signatures, only a static heavy hum, like a hymn in reverse. The Celti called it the Void Psalm. They began to wither. Their mind vines refused communion with other species. They feared a virus, a curse, something ancestral. We, the Vaxari, dismissed them. We clung to order, until Wormsong Station fell. Located on the edge of the Taurian fracture, Wormsong had served as a galactic listening post for over a century. Staffed by 33 species, manned by over 20,000. It was impenetrable, or so we thought. On the 9th cycle of Tharnal's rise, Wormsong sent a distress call. The only words deciphered were, "They're singing through our walls." By the time the response fleet arrived, the station had been carved. That is the only appropriate word. The outer hull peeled open like skin. The inner decks laid bare, spiraling into themselves. Every console had been overloaded, from within. Every crew member had vanished. No trace. Not a single scream. Not a drop of blood. Just a single phrase carved into the captain's chair, scorched with some kind of plasma torch, written in Terran English. "We remember." The Dominion panicked. For the first time in eons, a general mobilization was declared. They blamed radicals, bioterrorists, rogue artificial intelligences. They could not fathom the truth, that extinction had failed, that humanity had survived. I had my own doubts until I saw it. The Vigilant Requiem, a name I shall never forget. The vessel appeared in the Cradle Verge, where 3 star lanes intersect and Dominion convoys travel unguarded. The Requiem was unlike any human design we had archived. No hard steel exteriors, no glowing engines. It was black, matte. It devoured light. It moved without propulsion, as if the void itself bled around it. The Requiem intercepted a 30-ship convoy of Vaxari and Krathi diplomats en route to a conference in Lyath Prime. 17 seconds after initial contact, all Dominion ships were obliterated. No weapons were detected. No warnings were given. The only thing that remained was a single probe, jettisoned just before destruction. I acquired it through unofficial channels. The footage within was brief, but seared itself into my secondary neural lobe. A human figure stood at the Requiem's prow. Not in armor. Not with guns. Cloaked in dark robes, their face obscured by a cracked Terran pilot's mask. They raised a single hand, as if in benediction, and every ship around them disintegrated. I do not know what weapon it was. I only know the Dominion had nothing to match it. Within cycles, whispers began among the archives. Project Tenebrae. I unearthed forbidden logs. The humans, during their final hours, had launched ships. Experimental, illegal, hidden even from their own governments. Not mere vessels, but conscious machines. Not quite AI, not quite human. Fused spirits of dead commanders and rogue sentience, forged from the collapse of Earth's final AIs. Living weapons. There had been 5, if the data was true. The Vigilant Requiem was merely the first. But these ghosts were not alone. Soon, Dominion patrols reported new threats. Entire fleets, cloaked, silent, drifting among asteroid belts and abandoned colonies. The attacks became more elaborate. First, they disabled comms. Then, life support. Then, lights. Ships were found with crews locked in their cabins, eyes burned out, fingers curled in prayer. Others drifted in perfect condition, except for a single Terran sigil painted in blood across the bulkhead. "We are the silence you gave us." I received a transmission from a Celti outpost on Vega 7. It came from a survivor. Her voice was brittle, maddened, yet piercing. They come in songs, not music, not noise. They infect memory. They made us see. One looked at me, just one, and I remembered Earth's end like it happened to me. I was on fire. My daughter was melting beside me. But I have no daughter. I have no child. What are they? I had no answer, but I began to believe. The Vexari Highmind denied these accounts. They called it hysteria, war trauma. But I had read enough Terran literature to know a pattern. Revenge. Not war, not conquest. Retribution. The humans had not returned to rebuild. They returned to bury us, one piece at a time. The next confirmed ship was called the TNS Dirge of Reeds. It appeared above a mining colony on Lilurathi, a Dominion subject species moon. The Dirge released no weapons. Instead, it transmitted Earth music, a sorrowful orchestral piece in a language unknown. Lilurathi workers fell into seizures. The song reactivated dormant memories in their neurosymbiotes. Memories not their own. Terran ones. After 12 minutes, the colony's fusion core imploded. It was not a weapon, it was a eulogy. I submitted a report to the Vexari Grand Council. The Terrans are no longer biological. They are no longer a species. They are a wound, a psychic scar. You cannot defeat a ghost. You can only acknowledge what made it. They revoked my archive access within one rotation. But it was too late. Even the Krathi began to pray to human faces. The Dominion's control was fracturing, and far beyond mapped space. The Requiem waited. I have begun to believe that they allowed Earth to fall, not as a final act of defiance, but as a seed, a memory weapon, planted in the soul of the galaxy. And now the fruit ripens. They began to call it the Blooded Maw, not the humans. United States. A name whispered across Dominion channels, across fractured fleets and crumbling colonies. A name for a phenomenon that eluded language, a pattern only recognized through trauma. The Blooded Maw was not a place, it was an event, a horror that unfolded across multiple systems, across sectors believed secure, believed sterilized. The humans did not attack from without. They erupted from within. The first recorded instance occurred in the Alphiran Breach, where 3 Dominion bastion stations coordinated the defense of 17 worlds. The humans had no presence there, no known surviving colonists, no history. Yet on the 3rd day of the Tharnal rain cycle, Station Keithax received a garbled data burst from station locks. Command compromised. They are among us. They wear our faces. 17 minutes later, locks detonated from within. 6,000 Dominion lives lost. No survivors. No enemy ships. Only silence. And blood mist on drifting hull shards. The attack on Halveris 4 was worse. That colony was not human, not even marginally. It was a Krathi religious settlement, insular, xenophobic, shrouded in mycelial cloisters. Their temples were shielded by atmospheric dissonance fields. Untouchable. They burned in 19 minutes. Witnesses reported figures, humanoid, in atmospheric suits older than most living species. Terran military black. No insignia, no communication. They moved like shadows with muscle, like echoes made flesh. The Krathi defenders, fanatical and rabid in their devotion, unleashed their most sacred weapons: neuroburst phages, soul cages, pain song cannons. The figures did not slow. One survivor's mind spool, retrieved post-mortem, recorded what she saw. They smiled. Even while burning, even while bleeding out in the soil, they smiled, and they kept walking toward me. That was the night the Krathi High Chaplain ended her own life on the steps of the Dominion Temple of Judgment. I observed the growing dread, as a scientist might chart the spread of a virus. Only this was no pathogen. This was memory spreading like plague. Entire crews began reporting hallucinations. Dreams of Terran cities no longer standing, of oceans boiling over with ash, of a child named Ira choking in smoke. The name Ira appeared across dozens of reports, uncorrelated, unprompted. The word became a talisman, a curse. Some began carving it into their skin. Others whispered it before detonating themselves to avoid capture. We could not explain it. There were no broadcasts, no infiltrators discovered, no known AI virus. And yet, they were inside us. The strike on Verakai Prime brought everything to the breaking point. That world had been a Vaxari jewel, our cultural hub, our symphonic forge, the heart of our neural network. The attack began not from space, but from below. Human strike teams, cybernetically modified, surgically invisible to Dominion sensors, emerged from the planet's magma tunnels. They had been there for years, sleeping, waiting. One of them, recorded before the planetary feed collapsed, walked through a plaza lined with our holo memories. He wore no armor, only a charred Terran uniform and a necklace made of old Dominion officer tags. His face bore no malice, only grief. He placed a single beacon in the center of the plaza and spoke one sentence. "We asked to live. You answered with fire. This is your reply." The beacon pulsed once, and then Verakai burned. 3 billion lives, gone in less than 2 hours. The fires did not reach the upper atmosphere. They didn't have to. It was then that I, Threxal Zanquor, felt fear for the first time in my 300 rotations. Not at the destruction, but at the method. They were not waging war. They were rewriting the shape of terror. I was granted rare access to a captured feed, smuggled from a salvaged distress buoy recovered near Gorgalis Ridge, where a Dominion fleet had encountered a vessel marked TNS Vesper Blade. Aboard the Blade, a survivor, one First Lieutenant Marius Rell, presumed dead during the fall of Earth, delivered a speech to his crew. It had been private, not intended for broadcast, but we heard it anyway. We were forgotten, left to rot, but we remembered them. Every moment of fire, every broken scream, every child who watched their sky turn black. They took our world. So now we take the stars, one by one, not to rule, not to govern, but to make sure the Dominion never forgets what it cost to silence us. His crew saluted him. Every one of them bore surgical scars where their emotion centers had been modulated, not removed, but enhanced for empathy. They felt everything, and they used it to kill with purpose. They did not spare civilian convoys, not always, but when they did, it was calculated. Some ships were allowed to escape, to speak, and always the stories they told were identical. A single human vessel appearing without warning, systems failing in perfect sequence, a final warning broadcast in dead languages, the sound of weeping in the ventilation shafts, and a voice, never the same, yet unmistakably human, whispering, "We are the blood you spilled. We are the mouths you sealed." The Dominion finally responded with overwhelming force. Operation Skywound, a 10,000-ship counteroffensive, led by the Vaxari High Admiral Selquor and the Selthi Mindbinder Choirs. Their objective, the Scorch Belt, an old human colony belt thought to be abandoned. We now believed it housed a hidden Terran fleet yard. They never arrived. Not a single vessel returned. All that was found was a single fragment of Selquor's flagship, fused into the skeletal remains of what had once been a human child. It was posed, as if mocking us. The blooded maw was now etched into our records not as myth, but as prophecy. And in the far reaches of the rim, a new threat emerged, the Pact of Thorns. Species once subjugated by the Dominion, outliers, mutants, failed experiments, had joined the Terran resurgence. Humanity had become a banner, a rallying cry. We, the Dominion, had taught them oppression. Humanity taught them vengeance. I sat alone in the deepest vault of our archive, listening to Earth's last surviving audio log, smuggled from a long-dead satellite found orbiting Titan. A child's voice, crackling with static, sang a lullaby. The words were foreign, but the emotion, loss beyond repair, cut through every layer of species and language. As it ended, I felt something wet touch my sensory membrane. It took me hours to understand. I was crying, and the blooded maw continued to open, wider and wider. Not just in our fleets, but in our minds, our faith, our identity. We were bleeding, and the humans were only beginning. It was not the loss of ships that broke us. It was the loss of certainty. The Dominion was a god machine of bureaucracy and order, forged in aeons of silence. We exterminated, assimilated, archived. The galaxy conformed to the pattern. Deviance was measured, isolated, sterilized. But humanity had torn a hole in the design. And now, through that rupture, something else was bleeding in. The Krathi priests were the first to fracture. They had once held ceremonies of genetic purification atop the ruins of Terran colonies. Now they held funerals for dreams they could no longer control. Some began flaying themselves in public, sobbing the names of long-dead humans they had never met. Others sewed their mouths shut. The Selthi, more fragile in their photosynthetic empathy, succumbed to collective catatonia. Their thought hives collapsed in unison after intercepting a Terran signal from the Perseus Rift, an audio file laced with pulses of sorrow and rage, disguised as music. Only one phrase was ever translated. You cannot erase the soil where our bones still lie. In the outer colonies, desertions began. Entire garrisons abandoned their posts. A Krathi vessel arrived at Vaxari orbit, its crew stripped naked, chanting in old Earth dialects. Their leader, a once purist commander named Kajal, threw himself out the airlock after transmitting a single Terran phrase into every channel. Let it hurt. I began to see signs myself. Small things. The archive's temperature dropping by fractions each cycle. The ancient lexicons corrupted, not randomly, but precisely, replacing Dominion terms with human equivalents. Dreams infected with smells I had never known. Smoke, ash, blood. The memory of a dog barking in a ruined alley. But I had never seen a dog. We convened an emergency tribunal to discuss the spreading collapse. Of the 12 high seats, only 4 arrived. The rest were either dead, missing, or in what the Selthi called soul silence, a permanent shutdown of neural function brought on by emotional overload. Admiral Quarantile, one of our oldest tacticians, spoke plainly. The humans have learned a new weapon. It is not fire, not steel. It is remembrance. And it is more lethal than anything we've ever built. He was dead by the end of the week. Self-immolation? No note. Only a child's drawing from Earth clasped in one withered hand. Then came the collapse of Exarch Gate, the largest hyperspace node in the inner sectors, a choke point for over 50 worlds, heavily guarded, monitored, sterilized of all Terran residue. The Dominion lost contact at 0441 local cycle. Surveillance logs showed only static, no approach signatures, no breach alarms. Then, one final visual transmission. A single human warship, the Osterwake, drifting silently in front of the gate. Its hull was scarred, its engines inert, its weapons cold. But still, it moved toward the gate. And then, the stars themselves folded, not in warp, not in time, in meaning. The gate's entire superstructure forgot its own purpose. Sensors began identifying the structure as Earth, others as home, some as mother. The engineers aboard went mad trying to recalibrate. They tore out their own eyes before the core detonated. In desperation, the Dominion turned to its old sins. They reactivated the lament engines, devices of extinction built during the Age of Flame, prohibited by all civilized codes. They did not destroy planets. They made them wish to die. Atmospheric sorrow radiators, neural dampening signals, synthetic grief frequencies. Each world bathed in psychic decay until every thinking being lost, the will to breathe. They deployed one on Thraxis too, a suspected Terran supply post. It worked. The humans there perished. But their final act was to fire a single projectile into deep space. We tracked it for days. It was not a bomb. It was a coffin. Inside was a letter, addressed not to the Dominion, but to a child named Alien, age 6, presumed lost in the fall of Earth. The letter read, "They're hurting, Alien, and I think we'll all become ghosts soon. But I hope you're somewhere safe, with the sky above and the sea below. And if you're reading this, it means they couldn't kill us all. That means they failed. That means we were right to fight." It ended with a crude drawing of a smiling family. The projectile never stopped drifting. To this day, it continues past the rim, undeterred. By now, the Terran Alliance had revealed itself. No longer a myth, it emerged from the dark like a second coming. Not a nation, but a fractured choir, a coalition of survivors, defectors, and synthetic descendants. Their fleets bore no standard shape. Some were grown, some were coded. Some were built from the wreckage of the species we had thought our slaves. The Vari constructs, once Dominion-bound machine intelligences, pledged themselves to humanity after the humans taught them to dream. The Cairn Fex, a nomadic gas species we once condemned as parasites, now sang Terran hymns in frequencies that cracked Vaxari alloy. Even the Ornathi, whom we had engineered into labor drones, broke their chains and carved new faces from human skull imagery. They called it art. The Dominion was drowning. Not in war, in meaning. We no longer knew what to call ourselves. Our maps lost relevance. Our words lost context. Our orders lost authority. Every intercepted Terran transmission ended the same way. We forgive nothing. I remember the day the High Archive burned. A single drone, Terran in origin, but constructed from a stealthy mind-vine mesh, descended into the chamber and released a low-frequency scream. Not a weapon, a child's sob. Every text, every law, every imperial song we had ever recorded turned to ash. Not through fire, but through rejection. The database's neural lattice unraveled, refusing to contain untruth. The truth. We had murdered children, and now the children had returned. Some Vaxari begged for peace, but the humans never offered it. They were not interested in surrender. They did not want dialogue. They were too hurt to speak our language. So we began to fracture from within. Civil war erupted across 13 sectors. Some blamed the Krathi, some blamed the humans. Others whispered the truth. We killed Earth. And Earth remembers. I sit now in the wreckage of the Outer Archive, alone. Outside, the sky glows with the descent of another Terran vessel. I no longer feel fear, only comprehension. We taught them what hatred felt like, and they built a galaxy out of it. They didn't come back to take our worlds. They came to show us what they looked like burning. And soon, we will see. The Vaxari Dominion lasted 9,000 years. It collapsed in less than 9 months. In the beginning, we believed in the power of infrastructure, bureaucracy, oversight, systems so vast and entwined that no single spark could ignite rebellion. But we had not accounted for embers, those scattered, forgotten flames still smoldering in the corpses we left behind. Humanity had become an inferno. And now, we were the ones choking on ash. The Caprice Accord was the first core world to fall. It had once been a fortress moon, a living memory vault of Dominion law, culture, and genetic records. I had visited it often. It held over 600 billion identicodes of archived history, including the full records of the Terran extermination. They came not with fleet, but with storm. The clouds split. The air turned to glass. Gravity fractured. By the time the first Defender unit activated, it was already over. The moon itself had been rewritten, its orbit disrupted, its biosphere inverted by a weapon we still do not understand. Not chemical, not radiation, emotion. A weaponized frequency of grief. Every living thing on Caprice Accord simply stopped. Not from agony, but from remembering too much. We tried to retaliate. I watched from the orbital console as Fleet Obsidian, the last fully intact Vexari battle group, descended on the Terran-aligned system of Calparith. It was a strike meant to cripple, to instill fear. What awaited them was the Iron Light, the flagship of the Terran Alliance. Not a ship, but a monument. Over 30 kilometers long, built from the remains of shattered colony worlds, it bore no color, no insignia. Its hull was a fusion of bone and steel, and at its helm, Admiral Maddox Reese. The Dominion called him the Phantom of Saturn, but he was no ghost. I was granted remote access to the Iron Light's initial transmission. He appeared in ragged dress uniform, one eye augmetic, face etched with burn scars that stretched from chin to neck, where Dominion incendiaries had once tried to silence him. His voice was calm, measured. We gave you music. You gave us silence. We gave you children. You gave us corpses. So now, Vaxari, we give you judgment. Obsidian fired first. 3,000 energy lances screamed across the dark. The Iron Light did not move. It absorbed the assault, redirected it, mirrored it, fractured space in a way that rendered the fleet's weapons obsolete. The light bent. Physics refused to obey. Within 4 minutes, Obsidian was gone. All that remained was a transmission fragment. They don't kill for territory. They kill to be remembered. In the following weeks, 7 core worlds declared secession from the Dominion, and not to independence, to human alliance. Even some of our own Vaxari broke away. The defector commander Veltrin Vey, once my pupil at the archive, led a rebellion at Glasson Reach. His fleet, flying under Terran sigils, used ancient pre-Dominion tactics, chaos warfare, emotional misdirection, semantic collapse. He left a message for me. Personal. Threxall. They showed us that our peace was built on screams. I chose the screams. Across the rim, the Cairn Fex etched human prayers into the gas fields of their homes, creating spectral hymns visible from orbit. The Vari constructs constructed memory sculptures out of Dominion war wreckage, everyone a shrine to a human who died unnamed. We had become relics in our own empire. And the Terrans? They had become myth-made flesh. But the most harrowing moment came when we recovered the personal logs of General Violet Calder, second in command of the Terran war fleet. Captured during the Siege of Broken Sands, her escape was legend, but her voice, broken, steady, burning, was not legend. It was a reckoning, her final log entry, retrieved from the wreckage of the TNS Brazenthorn, played across Dominion broadcasts for 3 full cycles before the High Mind could shut it down. They say we came back to conquer. We came back because we remembered everything. Every city turned to ash. Every child who thought the stars were safe. We came back because you made forgetting impossible. So now we make your memories a graveyard, one you can never climb out of. I asked myself then, were we truly conquered? Number conquest implies power. But this was not power. This was consequence. The High Mind fractured soon after. The collective thought field that once linked all Vaxari administrators began to erode. Some sub-minds turned inward, creating recursive loops of denial. Others lashed out in madness, uploading false orders, self-sabotaging fleets, infecting civil sectors with contradictory war protocols. One fragment even tried to emulate human grief, believing that would render it immune to the Terran advance. It wept for 12 hours, then self-terminated. I went to the Temple of Silent Geometry, once our sanctuary of truth, where only the purest thought patterns were allowed to resonate. It was empty. Only a single Terran relic stood at the center, a bronze memorial plate, charred, pulled from the ruins of New Nairobi after Earth fell. To the forgotten mothers, the children buried in sand, the songs we never finished. At the outermost edge of known space, the Dominion once maintained a dark zone known as the Womb Vaults, a biogenetic facility for manufacturing sterilization agents, a place of genocide. The Terrans found it. They did not destroy it. They broadcast it. Every detail, every atrocity, every experiment. And they made the galaxy watch. 112 species withdrew from the Dominion the next cycle. Some called for reparations, others simply armed themselves and flew toward Terran space, to kneel. And in the center of this collapsing order, I remained, a lone archivist, recording the death of his civilization, not with anger, not even regret, but with clarity. We did not fall because we were outgunned. We fell because we taught the galaxy what it felt like to be broken. And the galaxy learned. The last act came quietly. No fleets, no songs. A single human emissary, Calder Verne, born on Europa Station before it burned, arrived at the remnants of the Vaxari capital. He did not demand surrender. He simply walked through the ashes of our past and said, "You had your time. Now it is ours, not to build, but to bury what you were." We handed him the keys to our central memory vault, and he did not destroy it. He turned it into a museum, every war, every sin, on display, labeled, named, remembered. The Dominion is no more. Its emblems now hang above the doors of orphanages built by the Terrans, not as trophies, but as warnings. I remain, not as archivist, not as Vaxari, but as a witness. And in my silence, I hear the Terran hymn echo through the ruins. We are not your monsters. We are your mirrors.